a nice little platform. I've never used it before.
It's great. All right. Thanks so much for joining me today, Melanie. This is I'm not even sure, but I think we're into like 10 or 11 of these LinkedIn Lives we've been doing this fall, which has been an amazing experience. And I've really enjoyed connecting with people working in all kinds of different areas and organizations, everyone from civil servants to other nonprofit professionals, other consultants. And I'm very excited for today's conversation. Melanie is currently in the role of Director of Government Partnerships at Pathways to Education Canada, which was my first official government relations role, although I have been doing work very similar to it for a long time, and really a highlight of my career. I was there in that role from 2014 to 2017, over 3 years, and had so many incredible opportunities to meet government officials all across Canada during that time, and certainly for me, have a few career highlights that were part of the experience of working for Pathways. And Pathways is an incredible organization, founded in Toronto, but with programs now across Canada. I'm going to let Melanie, as I was just saying before we started, I'm going to let her give the most recent elevator pitch, because I'm a little bit concerned I would be out of date. So I think my elevator pitch probably goes back about 5 or 6 years now, is a little bit stale. But what I do know for sure is it's a fantastic organization that has a lot of really interesting relationships with government at different levels and in different contexts, and fascinating sort of history and lessons learned. So we're going to talk a bit about what it means to work on government relations at an organization like Pathways, and what does that look like, but also a bit about Melanie's own career path as well in the nonprofit world and what's led her to doing this role, and just talk a bit more about some of the experiences we've had working together as well over the last little while. So Melanie, for now, I think I'll turn it over to you. I guess before I do that, so we're going to be here till 12:30. As always, feel free to post questions, and we will hopefully get a chance to respond to them during the course of our conversation. Very happy to take any questions you might have, and really excited to be here this week. And we'll, at the very end, if you're interested in learning more about my work or about Melanie's work, we can share some places where you can follow us and learn more about our respective organizations, etc. So Melanie, over to you. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Jesse. It's such a pleasure. Every time we work together, we have some laughs, and we definitely are able to connect just based on government relations and in general, but also I love that you have the legacy at Pathways, and I'm often digging through our archived files, and I see some great work that you put together that I'm able to kind of bring up and revise, and certainly the folks that you worked with that are still there all speak so highly of you. So really happy to be here. I can certainly talk a little bit. I guess I'll start talking about myself,
please,
my background. So I kind of fell into government relations by accident, as I feel a lot of us have. So just if we're going way back, I grew up as a kid that was involved with the YMCA. So I did a lot of youth programming there. I was a lifeguard there, and I grew up going to a YMCA camp, Camp Wanakita, if anybody out there is familiar. And so that organization was really just a huge part of my childhood. And as I was growing up and realizing I couldn't be a camp counselor forever, I started getting summer jobs in the employment services aspect of what the YMCA did. So I was basically a job developer for other students who were looking for summer jobs. That at the time was called, I believe it was called Summer Job Service, part of Job Connect. So anyone out there with an employment services background in Ontario might remember that program. But that was my summer job. And then after I finished my undergrad, I started doing that permanently. So I was an employment counselor, primarily for new immigrants, and working at the YMCA in Ottawa. So at that time, I knew we were government funded, the provincial government in particular. And as I started working my way into management roles, I started getting more and more involved with our funders. So it became part of my role to interact with the funder regularly, make sure that we were reporting appropriately on our outcomes, on our budgets, and then really started getting into the world of fund development. So determining what funding opportunities were out there for our organization, putting together hopefully great proposals for new programming or to continue existing programming. So that started as I moved into senior leadership. That became a really big part of my role as well. So government relations was always kind of a piece of my role, certainly not the primary focus. The primary focus was team management and program development and program management. But the government side was always really interesting for me. I loved to kind of tell the story of our organization to the funders. I loved advocating for us, for our clients that we worked with, for the staff that I worked with, to government to basically, try to get those levels of funding that we needed to get, as well as kind of create a little bit of flexibility within our budgets, which depending on the funder is hard to do at times. So yeah, for about 15 years there, I worked for the YMCA in Ottawa, managing government-funded social service programs. So primarily in the employment services and settlement areas. So I got really good exposure to federal funders through immigration, through ESDC, employment programming, and great exposure to the Ontario government as well, predominantly Employment Ontario, and also through some kind of more foundational based funding like United Way, for example. So yeah, I was able to really build my experience up through that. So it was a great learning ground. I was lucky to work for an organization that had a great reputation, like the YMCA. I don't think there's anyone out there that doesn't know who they are. But then our challenge was also kind of spreading the message that we weren't just a gym and swim, or childcare, that we were supporting people in kind of almost every element of what they could need. So that kind of was a really good training ground for me too, to be able to advocate for an organization that people didn't necessarily know of every element of, but we had this great reputation and this great name to be able to kind of secure meetings and have our proposals taken seriously.
It's interesting. Yeah, no, just sorry because
please, yeah.
What you were saying about working with the Y and managing those programs. Oh, we have a bit of an echo. Is it reminds me a lot of some conversations I've been having lately, kind of about the role of the nonprofit sector in delivering programs on behalf of government, and thinking about the extent to which there's kind of a mutual dependency, which can be seen as I think as a really positive, as well as sometimes seen as a negative thing. But I think it's certainly a big part of the social service delivery reality in Canada. I think is that relationship, and I think to me I see the positives of that a lot more, in the sense that I think often organizations who are on the front line can go further and reach more people and do it more quickly sometimes than government, and I think government relies on those partnerships. At the same time, it also puts a lot of responsibility on the sector to deliver programs that can be really essential sometimes. So I don't know, what your thoughts are on that, what your experience has been on that, and your time working at the Y as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a push and pull, and as GR professionals, or as the manager that's responsible for the relationship, I think it's up to you to create that relationship and to create that mutual understanding where, yes, we're a recipient, and yes, we are in a certain degree subservient to our funder, in the sense of making them happy and achieving, especially if your funding is through a specific program where the parameters are already set. There's definitely that level of push and pull, where you're trying to be in my opinion, I think that the most successful organizations are the ones who are cooperative with government, and the ones who understand why government has to have those parameters, or why they have to put pressure on you as far as your outcomes or your budget. And you approach them, and Jesse, this is, I know what you teach us through your courses is you approach them with empathy. Everybody's just trying to get their job done, right? And so the program officer that's being a particularly annoyance to you, that's because they're getting pressure from above them, and they're getting and everything kind of flows downhill. And to a certain degree, you just have to be empathetic and realize, okay, the reason they're bugging me about this particular budget line or this particular outcome, there's a reason for it. And so let's approach it from that middle ground, and then kind of develop a mutual understanding of how we can meet in the middle. And I think in my experience, so in the Ottawa is a small city, and there were a lot of us delivering similar programming in the settlement or the employment sector or the youth sector. And so you got to see how a lot of the other agencies who had similar funding handled their relationships with government, some kind of more from the adversarial position of being a little bit more argumentative. And I think it's important that we advocate for ourselves, but I also think it's important that we show that we're a team player, and that we understand, like I said, where they're coming from and why they're putting certain pressure on us. So I learned so much in that role, both from internally at the YMCA, but also from the partners that we worked with outside. So that was my training ground. And I loved it. And I loved the organization, the people I worked with. But at a certain point, I was ready for a change. And I was used to wearing about 12 different hats when I worked for the YMCA. And I said, okay, I think I'm ready to hone in my skills and wear maybe just one for a little while. And I had always known about Pathways to Education just from there is an Ottawa location, so from the network. And I had always really admired the organization, and they had the director of government relations role was available. So I decided to take a risk after 15 years at the same organization and apply. And I was successful. And so almost 2 years ago now, I've been at Pathways to Education Canada, wearing that one hat, just government relations, and really enjoying it. And again, learning so much. I have so much more time to do true in-depth government relations that I didn't before. And so it's been a huge learning experience for me these past 2 years. And I've been so lucky to have met you, Jesse, and both through your courses, it's really helped me, but also just chatting about your experience with Pathways, knowing that you have the context has been really helpful too. So yeah, I can kind of give the elevator pitch of Pathways.
Yeah, please tell us about Pathways and then maybe about what you do there and the highlights as well.
Yeah, definitely. So Pathways to Education Canada is the organization that I work for. So we're essentially, I guess you could picture it as the foundation of the Pathways to Education program across Canada. So we're kind of the back office, if you like. The office itself is based in Toronto. I'm based just outside of Ottawa, so I do work remotely. But Pathways to Education is a national charity, and our mission is to eradicate poverty through education. And so the program aims to support youth who are living in low-income communities throughout Canada in successfully graduating high school and pursuing post-secondary and a successful future. So I think we all know, although education in Canada is free, it's still not equitable. And so there are still many barriers that vulnerable youth, particularly those living in low income situations, face when it comes to being successful in school. And so the program helps to combat those barriers, to give students the skills and the tools to be able to be successful in pursuing their education. So the program is located in 31 communities across Canada, all the way from Vancouver to Halifax, and many in between. And the program is predominantly an after-school program, and it works with young people in like I said, low-income communities at providing academic support, so things like tutoring and navigation of the post-sec application process, navigating credit accumulation, kind of figuring out the complicated aspects of school. There's also financial support, and so being able to cover barriers such as public transportation when it comes to getting to school, food insecurity, so we're able to cover food vouchers for students, and scholarships. So the young people who participate in the program and graduate do have access to a scholarship for post-sec. There's also a huge social element, so bringing young people together, participating in group team building exercises. And then probably most importantly is our mentorship element. So every young person that joins the program in grade 9 gets assigned to a one-on-one support person who's a positive adult role model for them. Usually it's somebody from their community who they can see in themselves. And that person is their mentor from grade 9 all the way to graduation. And so a lot of what we know is that young people don't necessarily always have the social capital that it requires in order to be successful in life. And so Pathways is aiming to help them build that social capital and help them have that person who they can count on to make sense of life for them and to hold them accountable and to support them through their journey. So it's a beautiful program, and it's so hard to summarize in an elevator pitch. But I think my favorite part of having joined Pathways is when I do get to visit the programs in action. So part of government relations is helping to tell this story to all levels of government of who you are and what your impact is. And so part of what I get to do is bring, whether it be politicians or public servants at the bureaucrat level, host tours of our program locations, particularly when students are there. So during tutoring sessions, we have, 60 young people all buzzing in a room doing their tutoring sessions. And I'm able to bring folks from the government in to see the program in action, to see it in its magic. And that's always the highlight for me. I was just in Winnipeg 2 weeks ago visiting our program there, and it was just the most warm and supportive and caring environment, which I think we all take for granted, the fact that some kids don't have that at home or don't have that elsewhere in their life. And so it was pretty beautiful to see that these young people who really deserve that kind of space can get it with Pathways. So those are definitely the highlights. I think too, so Pathways has been, as Jesse said, has been operating for over 22 years now. So we started in Regent Park and have grown to 31 communities across Canada. And so I'm very fortunate that our reputation within government typically precedes me having to tell folks about who we are and what we do. So not only is it, easy to get people's emotional connection to our program, but we also have fantastic research and evaluation, both internally and externally, that gives us some really amazing, compelling statistics and figures that demonstrate the return on investment that any funder would have with our program. So I think we all know that ROI is what speaks to both government and other funders. And so I'm very lucky to have those tools that I can easily help people see the benefits of Pathways if they don't already know who we are. So I'm very lucky that way. Also very lucky we've had really long-term funding relationships with our biggest funders. So the federal government, the Ontario government, and we've had the Quebec government on board for a few years now. So my job a lot of the time is maintenance. It's just making sure that folks still see the need for the program, that I'm advocating for what's, any challenge facing that might be new. So yeah, I'm lucky that I have a really great toolbox that I can use.
Yeah, and I guess I think on that, sorry, the echo. On that again, I think it's interesting because I think people focus a lot on getting funding, right? And this is a really common conversation, I think, in nonprofit circles in general. But when you have a program like Pathways, and I think also kind of like what the work you're doing with the Y as well, there's a long-term relationship there, right? And the program, for good and for bad, really relies a lot on the partnerships it has with government. I think it's, which is an incredible thing in terms of the impact you're able to create. But of course there's challenges because it's not always going to be a sure thing year after year, right? And so I think one of the things that I know, that was happening to some extent when I was at Pathways for sure, but it was a big focus of the role was on maintaining those relationships with government officials at all levels, municipally, provincially, federally, but also at all levels in terms of within the bureaucracy as well, all the way up to the political level. And so I'm just wondering, from your own experience, are there things that you would suggest or recommend to people, advice that you give to organizations who have funding now, and once that exciting feeling of, yay, we won, we got it, that's passed. What is that? That's in many ways where the real work begins, right? And what would be your advice to people who are in that position and wanting to maintain funding?
Yeah, I mean, I think relationship management is key. So making sure that you develop that close relationship with your program officer, whoever it is to have been assigned to your file. Just get to know that person, set up regular meetings with them where at the very least you're telling them a story. You're letting them know, hey, here's what I heard from the program the other day. How cool is this? Whether it be a success story or, just something a little lighthearted. I think for the most part, the public servants within government, they are behind the desk and they are not necessarily getting out into the actual social services world where we all work in day to day. And so making that connection for them and reminding them why your program exists from a storytelling perspective, I think is really important. And do it casually. I mean, you certainly don't have to make a PowerPoint for them every time you meet, but just, hey, I was in Winnipeg and this is, how cool is this? This is what one of the young people said to me as I was passing by, or whatever the case. I think making the program come alive to them is always great for relationship building. And I think the other thing too, and I already mentioned it, is make sure that you're always making the case for your ROI. What's the return on investment that your program, your organization is bringing to government? They meaning your program officer, whatever middle policy officer it is that you're dealing with, their role is to constantly try to recommend whether you should continue to get funding, whether your funding should be able to be flexible in this way or that way. And so make their job easy for them. Make that argument for them, whether it be in writing or, narrative, so that their job is easy. It's easy to work with you. And it doesn't mean that you shouldn't argue or advocate if something's not working for you. It just means you do it from a perspective where if you're bringing a problem to the table, you're also bringing a solution. So that, again, you're making their job easy. You're empathizing, like Jesse would say, you're empathizing with the fact that they're just trying to get a job done as well. Something I often keep in mind, if you are going out and doing meetings with any level of government, whether it be, central agencies, whether it be programs, or whether it be politicians, 90% of their day is not nice feedback, right? They're not, especially politicians, they're not hearing from people about what's going well in life or what's going well in their constituency. They're hearing about the shitty aspects, right? And so if you as an organization are going to be doing some outreach, just let them hear some good stuff. Let them know the funding I'm getting from your department is doing these really cool things. what else could we do together, right? So you're still definitely advocating and asking for more, for continuation, but you're bringing it in a positive light, which is so rare for them. Like, they're going to remember you. They're going to remember a positive meeting because, like I said, 90, 95, 99% of their day is the not so positive. So I think that's some advice that I would say too. And don't be afraid to have a sense of humor and have fun. And just remember that the folks you're dealing with are all human beings trying to do their job as well.
This is like music to my ears, Melanie, because a lot of this picks up on some of the things we've talked about in the courses that you've been part of, over the course of this past year. And I mean, obviously that comes from your own experience as well, and your own background in GR. But yeah, it's very much, aligns with a lot of the messaging that I try and give out as our core messaging. It's like, understand, what motivates them, where are they coming from, what are their challenges, and then see how you can work within that. And I think, also in terms of what, the piece you're mentioning around good news, it really resonates for me as well. I think in the sense that, it's an interesting relationship, and I think there's a balance. And it's not to say that, of course, sometimes, you might need to speak out and say, oh, we don't agree with X or Y decision, but I think it's when it's anchored in that kind of relationship, that's already a very solid relationship. You can have so much more of an impact in a lot of ways, right? If you already have this very solid partnership behind you, they know that there's mutual respect and understanding. I think that they're more likely to be able to respond, to feedback than if it's, you're only calling them when you have, you have bad news or something to complain about. So yeah, that really lines up with my own experience as well. In terms of when you've done, in your career, work on, work maybe trying to encourage government to move in one direction or another, or trying to make some changes. Do you have any examples of things you've done and what's worked for you in that kind of framework as well?
Yeah, definitely. So as I mentioned, we have really long-term funding from our two biggest funders. So I'll use the Ontario government as an example. So almost 20 years of funding with them, with almost entirely with the same ministry, about 15 years with the same ministry. And we have a great relationship with them already. Again, I kind of inherited that from folks like Jesse. We have the same program officers for many years, which is also very rare. So I will admit that it wasn't all my doing. But we had a few outcomes in our training in our agreement with the Ontario government that just weren't relevant to us anymore. I mean, the education system has changed in 20 years. The way Pathways does our work has changed. Our access to data and information has changed. So we just had these old outcomes that were redundant or a pain for us to try to get. And so I just, in order to support my team, the folks I work with on the program and the evaluation side, I just said, you know what? I noticed that these are pain points. Every year when we write our report, it's like, oh, this thing again that doesn't make sense and that's too hard to get. So I approached our funder and I just said, listen, I want to tell the story of our efficacy to you, because obviously, again, they need to just be able to report that up and up and up. So I said, let's come to the table and let's talk about these stats that don't mean much to us anymore, and therefore they probably don't mean much to you. And let's talk about what we can replace them with. So I think I made sure to approach it from the position of, like I said, not complaining, but saying, let's make some changes and bringing solutions to the table. So I'd already spoken with my colleagues in the evaluation team and said, what do we collect that we're not currently telling Ontario that would be a really compelling stat for them to have? And so we kind of went through some of those suggestions, presented them to Ontario and said, can we flip this for this? And they agreed. So I felt really great that we were able to get our agreement for this current year refreshed. We were able to get some new outcomes that made sense to us, that Ontario wanted to see, and that still showed impact to them. But we approached it as a team rather than both inside Pathways, but then also when I approached our funder, I treated her as part of our team. How can we do this together? And then she was able to, because she had a lot of the background reasoning of why we wanted these changes, she was able to quickly make the argument to her director, and the changes were able to be implemented. So I was proud of that. That was a really nice moment for us that we achieved this year.
I love that example. And I think, it's interesting because different organizations that I've worked with and as clients, but also just in terms of my career, I mean, that's a scenario that comes up a lot. I think where you might be already midway through delivering a program, and of course, this is real life and things change, and sometimes it's really challenging to go back and get that kind of flexibility from funders, and it's not always possible for them to grant it, to be fair as well, right? But I think it's with Pathways in particular, because there's really two main government funders that provide such a significant amount of your funding. I think it's just good to give that context that making an ask like that is quite significant, right? Like, I think, if you have 10 projects and they're all small, okay, well, maybe the risk isn't quite as significant. But when you have two government departments, provincially and federally, that together, bring a significant percentage of your funding to the table, I think those relationships are so important. But it's also at the same time, like, I think then it's also very important to be able to be open and honest and transparent, just like you were describing, and make things work more effectively for you. And I think that's something else that I really encourage people. I think that there's in my experience, I think there's a tendency to sort of, especially because people can kind of get used to getting government funding and it gets renewed, there's kind of a tendency to just sort of see it as part of the background of the work that you're doing, and not actually think of the fact that, well, no, this is a relationship like any other, and we actually need to be strategic about it. There are ways we can really improve it and maximize it, and things that we can do to make life easier for ourselves. I think sometimes people are a bit intimidated because they're worried to speak to government and try and ask for anything or make any changes. If they haven't, they're not comfortable, they don't realize that there's, as you were saying, people on the other end, who often really want to help and make things work. So I think that's such a great example of where you can build on that relationship and be open. And like you say, come to the table always with a solution as well, which is something anybody who's worked for me has probably heard me say that to them over the years, because it's definitely one of my mantras as well. It's like, okay, it's okay to highlight problems, but it's you need to also have something on the other side that you can offer them as far as a solution, at least to get started with anyway. No, I love that example. I think in terms of we're not surprisingly, the time went really, really quickly, because Melanie and I can talk for hours about our work at Pathways and about government relations. But I wanted to give it over to you, Melanie, in terms of if there's like, 2 or 3 things that you think are really important to keep in mind if you're wanting to work in this area, or if you already have funding and you just don't know, how to make the most of the relationship that you have as well. If you can just share with us a couple of those insights and anything, any reflections from any of the work we've done together as well, in terms of any of the courses that you did with us, and where you contributed a lot as well, and we're really glad to have you on board. But if there's anything else you just wanted to highlight, just I'll hand it over to you for the last kind of couple of minutes.
Yeah, for sure. So I think as most nonprofits don't necessarily have the resource to have a dedicated GR person, right? Which was my experience at the YMCA. I mean, YMCA Canada has a great GR team, but each independent organization might not have those resources, especially when you're a startup or you're small or you're grassroots. That's not the first thing you're going to fund, is a GR role, which is fair. But I think that regardless, everyone can still really benefit from having a deeper understanding of GR, especially if you are dependent on government funding or you're looking to be. And so look at the resources out there. You don't have to do it alone, and you can learn a lot without a ton of investment. And a great example is Jesse's courses. So your courses, Jesse, were really helpful in the sense that they they did, validate the fact that I was doing the right things, but they also showed me so many interesting tools. The good thing about government in Canada is that it is, for the most part, open for public consumption. And there are so many tools that I didn't know about, in terms of kind of getting background information on who's who, where the money is flowing, where the priorities are, the language that they use that you can mirror back at them, because that's always what you should do. That's my top piece of advice: mirror their language back at them. And so I think that's what your course did for me, is validate I was on the right track, but also give me so many new tools. And I think just the humanistic approach that you have, is really key, especially working for nonprofit. We're all mission-driven folks. And so I think we want to work from a place of empathy, and we want to work from that humanistic side of things. And the government are humans too. Most of my best friends and my partner, they all work for government, and they're just trying to get a job done as well. And so how can we support them? Because then they'll support us, right? So I think that that's certainly what your course solidified for me, as well as kind of finding those really useful kind of sleuthing tools that I think everyone needs when they're approaching government.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. And it was such a pleasure having you in the course, especially because I know Pathways and I could call on you to give examples and as we went through. But yeah, it's hopefully we can continue to do that together at various times. So I think I'll just wrap it up quickly here. If you're interested in what Melanie and I've been talking about, I'm always happy to talk GR. You can always set up a time to meet with me, and we can talk about working together. Also, we offer courses quite often. Right now, we're not currently running something right at the moment, but we're going to be running things in January again. January, we have a new course focusing specifically on Global Affairs Canada for people who work in the international development sector, because it's kind of its own beast in some ways. And that's going to be in January. And then later in the spring as well, we're going to be offering another one of our federal funding courses, similar to what we had done together. And then we're also hoping to offer a part 2 of that course, which is a bit more focused on, so what do you do when you actually get the money, and how do you make sure that you can negotiate the contract well and maintain the relationship? How do you deal with some of the potential problems that might come along? That kind of thing. So hopefully hoping to launch that in the beginning of 2024 at some point, or the first quarter. So anyways, it's really something for me at this point. A lot of the work that we do as a firm, most of our work is more in terms of providing support and providing some done for you services. But I really love the teaching part of it, and so I'm really happy to be able to bring more of that in. We have such a great contingent of students each time who bring their own experiences, and it was great to have you as part of that as well, Melanie. So if people want to learn more about Pathways or your work, is there anything that they should do to take a look at that?
Absolutely. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. It's Melanie Vaughn. You can find me through Jesse's contacts. Happy to connect there as well. pathwaystoeducation.ca. If you want to know more about our program and the work that we do. Just reach out to me directly. I'm also always happy to chat GR. I like to share what I've learned, but I love to learn from others as well. And the other great thing too, Jesse, about your course is we built a network of folks that took the course together, and we all learned from each other, which is always really fun and really interesting. And there's a lot of great work being done out there, and the government is still mysterious, but we're helping each other kind of understand, why the mysteries exist and how we can work around them.
I love that. I think I have to include some of that kind of detective language and sleuthing language in some of the ways we talk about our work as well. But anyway, because it's so true. But thanks, Melanie, so much for taking the time today. Always a great pleasure to talk with you, and wishing you all the best with your ongoing work with Pathways. It's an incredible program. And it's for me definitely, as I mentioned, a highlight of my career was getting to work with those programs, and like you said, going out and seeing the incredible work community partners were doing. And it's interesting, now as a parent of teens too, I think I can see even more the value of having other adults who are engaged and who really care about them and are giving them guidance in terms of where they want to go with their lives as well. So an incredible program, and also a great history of relationship with the government. And again, thanks so much for joining me. And hopefully others can join us over the next couple of weeks. We have a couple more great conversations coming up. And it's been really fun doing this series, and looking forward to the last few weeks. So thanks again, and have a great afternoon, everyone.